Okay, see if I can work everything here. All right, it's good to be with you today. I know many of you in the room. I used to give a lot of talks when I was at A&M out of Alabama or Bushland. Of course, at that time I worked with multiple crops, and it's been fun to concentrate on a single crop. So I've enjoyed that. After I left A&M again 3.5 years ago or so now, did go to work for a company specializing in energy sorghum, sweet sorghum and biomass sorghum. And that was interesting. I was their agronomist and learning how to grow essentially a new crop. And so I enjoyed that, traveled all over the world, spent a lot of time in Brazil and other places. And I quickly realized how different Brazil was from the Texas Panhandle. And after hearing the last talk, I think the Texas Panhandle is just about as much different here as compared to Nebraska. So that was an interesting talk. Actually, I'm going to be in Grand Island, I hope tonight, for a sorghum conference that they're having in Nebraska tomorrow. So I'm going to be leaving to do that. Okay, we'll get into sorghum here a little bit, and I think we'll end up getting probably a little bit ahead on time. Thought I had 30 minutes on the program, and I noticed when I got here I got 50, so we've got plenty of time for questions and things like that. Well, why sorghum? Number of reasons for I think why sorghum is a crop you need to consider. Certainly one of those things that it does have the reputation, and it is somewhat of a drought-tolerant crop. That's been its claim to fame for a long time. That being said, I think it does very much respond to timely irrigation. And that's something that I hope we can start focusing on in the future is how to irrigate, especially on deficit irrigations, how to best irrigate sorghum, and that's something I hope we can concentrate on as a checkoff in the near future here. Long planting window, I think there's certainly some advantages to that because of the different maturities of sorghum. You can plant it after wheat harvest, or you can plant it early. Now that being said, I think the sugarcane aphid that came in this year and hit this area probably harder than any other area in the U.S. this last year. And they changed the game a little bit when it comes to planting dates. Where typically you can plant late, and that a lot of times was a good choice. I really think with the sugarcane aphid we're going to be better off in most cases in planting early. Now there could be some exceptions to that. I was talking to a guy last week around Crest, and his thinking was to plant sorghum late. And one reason he wanted to do that, what he was thinking about doing was planting late, like 1st of July, and then planting a very short maturing hybrid at a high density. And he was as much interested in raising a lot of forage or residue as much as anything. And I think in that particular scenario, that may not be a bad idea to do that, because he's going to be growing a quick maturing sorghum, so that window or when the aphid could possibly affect it is going to be much shorter. And if we do end up with an aphid problem, I think it'll get by with one application. But I think for the most part, that early planting is going to be the way to go. We'll talk a bit more about that. Certainly the rotational benefits to cotton. You've heard talks on that over the years, but there's certainly some advantages when you do grow cotton that next year, that cotton crop, when you have sorghum in there in that rotation for a number of reasons. And controlling resistant weeds. I think we've been somewhat blessed in this area that we haven't had near the problems with resistant weeds as some of the Southeast has, for example, and other places. And I think that the reason for that is the farmers have done basically a pretty good job of rotating and using different mode of action herbicides. And you guys have all heard many talks about that. We are getting some resistant weeds now for sure in the area, but I think by good management practices, I think we don't have near the issue that some other areas in the country do, and we want to keep that. And the only way to do that is to keep using different mode of actions. The one way to do that certainly is to rotate crops and use different herbicides. Lower inputs compared to other crops, and I really think that's important, and that's an area that I want to focus on a little bit here. One advantage to sorghum certainly has been it has low input costs. And if you look at just seed costs alone, it becomes pretty apparent that right away you can save money just from that standpoint. And I think with low commodity prices across the board, anything you can do to save on input costs is going to be beneficial, and something I think you certainly have to take a look at. So this particular slide is comparing sorghum input costs or seed costs to corn and cotton, and at different seeding rates depending on if you're dry land or limited irrigated, or maybe you're really going to push the envelope for top yields, kind of what the differences in those seed costs alone would be. And it's certainly pretty significant, and I think something to look at. I want to spend some additional time talking about some other ways I think that you can just lower input costs with sorghum and other crops. Because again, I think in the environment we're in today, that's something that we need to be looking at. One, again, minimizing those seed costs, soil sampling and testing. You hear agronomists all the time preach that. You've got to know what you've got in your soil from a nutrient standpoint. Soil sampling is cheap compared to many other things, and you need to know what that is. If you can save a few dollars on nitrogen cost or phosphorus cost, or whatever the case may be, that's real money. So I certainly encourage you to do that. I know a couple of years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago now, we were doing a study down in the Lasbuddy area and working with a consultant. This is with corn, actually, at the time, and we wanted to do a nitrogen response study with some different equipment and some things we were doing. Talked to the consultant there and the farmer, and they said, oh yeah, this is a great site to do that because we never put on any more nitrogen than we need. And this site ought to be low in nitrogen. So I thought, great. So we go out and do some sampling, we do some deep soil sampling because we had to know what was there. Turns out he's got 200 pounds of nitrogen in the top 3 feet in that circle. If it's a corn crop, cotton crop, or sorghum crop, it's going to be able to use that deeper nitrogen. And if you don't know you have it, and you're spending money on fertilizer unnecessarily, then clearly that's not a good thing. So I would encourage you to do some deep sampling, just see what you got. You don't have to do the whole farm, but at least do a few samples here and there, and just take a look at that and see what kind of deep nitrogen you might have. And you sure may be able to save some dollars there. Maximizing your irrigation efficiency. Of course, that's critical, and I think most of you are aware of that. But now's the time to be thinking about that. Last couple of years, been working with a producer and with this interview sorghum, and the particular pivot we were using at that time initially had a lot of problems. We had nozzles that weren't right, the nozzles stopped up, and some, I think really the whole nozzle and package needed to be replaced. Take a look at your system. Know how much water you're putting out. If you need to do some pump work, some motor work, whatever the case may be, you got to do that as efficiently as possible. And so make sure your system is working good. Timely application, I'll talk a little bit about that with sorghum. On when's the best time to put water on the crop if you are in short supply of it. Weed control, I think, compare costs. I think with really any of these crops, there's certainly some options there. Maybe not as many options in sorghum as there is with corn, for example, or to some extent even cotton, but there are some options. And a lot of times, some of these herbicides will control the same weeds for the most part. Yeah, some of them have some advantages over others a little bit, but I really look at the cost. I mean, if you can save a couple of dollars on herbicide by using, for example, Guardsman rather than Bicep, or just an example, then do it, because they're going to, as far as the control, they're going to be very similar. So look at those costs. Adjuvants. One thing that I'm finding more and more of is there's a lot of good salesmen in the area, and they can sell you a lot of products to put in that tank. And some of those products are good, but a lot of them, I think you need to weigh the benefits of those. What all are you putting in that tank? Is it adding value? Try to find some independent data somewhere. Find some data on that if you can, and try to save a few dollars from that standpoint. Good example again with the sugarcane acre. Something that we've learned with that this last year. Adjuvants aren't doing you much good on that sugarcane acre. I can show you data of, I think, 6 different studies that were done around the country looking at adjuvants. You look at it and they just aren't helping. So if you can save yourself $3 an acre, hey, that's money in your pocket. So take a look at some of those things. Insect control, again, I think just scouting and timely application. Did you really need to put that application on or not? Take a look at that. Pre-plant decisions, because this is what you guys are all doing right now. You're making those decisions, and so a few things I want to talk about is hybrid selection, a little bit on seeding rate, actually a fair amount on seeding rate. You probably heard maybe more talks on that on sorghum than you want, but I'm going to talk about seeding rate, a little bit on planting date. Irrigation planting and water use is something I will concentrate on here in this presentation, and really not going to talk about weed control at all. If you've got some questions about that, be glad to answer those or insects. Well, hybrid selection, what are you looking for with hybrids? This is true with any crop, but certainly it's yield. I mean, yield's got to be number one. I think the temptation with sorghum this year is to try to find those hybrids that may have some tolerance to sugarcane aphid. I'll show you a slide on that here in just a minute, because I think there are some, but you can't give up yield, in my opinion, for much tolerance. Well, I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute, but yield is still clearly number one. Standability. This was one of those years this last year where we had a lot of lodging, throughout the region. And we had those periodically with sorghum. And this happened to be the year, this last year. And we can talk about that and why I think we had some issues with lodging. But when you have a year like last year and you have lodging, you certainly want to use that opportunity to take a look at what hybrids did stand up. Okay? If you can go 4 or 5 years and you don't have much lodging. So you begin to forget about that. Well, maybe it's not that big a deal, but those lodging or standability ratings, it is a big deal. And last year was a good example of that. And so take a look at that data that's out there. Find those hybrids that do stand. And there are differences in those hybrids. Might just also point out when I'm talking about lodging just a little bit. Back to that nitrogen issue. We definitely know that one thing that will increase lodging with sorghum is too much nitrogen. So that's another reason to know how much nitrogen you've got in your soil there, because it can promote some lodging. Of course, days of maturity is important depending again on kind of what you're doing, how much water you have in your soil at the time of planting. I think enters into that. If you're irrigating, how much water you can put on that, and to some extent what the forecast is. What is the potential out there? Tie that to some extent to the maturity you want to plant. And then the drought tolerance rating, and then I think finally insect tolerance is something you want to look at. There on the right-hand side, some of your sources of information. Most of you are going to go to your seed companies and visit with them, which is certainly a good source of information. Hopefully there's some decent university extension files out there that you can look at and kind of tie that in with the seed company data. And then, talking to the producers around you. What are those guys using that are being successful with sorghum? Find out what varieties they're planting. Certainly, one thing I would encourage you to do, whether it's sorghum, cotton, or corn, or whatever the crop is, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Plant more than one hybrid or variety. It's tempting to go with that variety that did the best last year, but that doesn't mean it's going to do the best in the coming year. So. I think it's always a good idea to plant more than one hybrid, so I would consider that. We are trying to keep our web page, that's kind of one of my charges from the agronomy side of it, is keep our web page up to date with new information. And so if you haven't visited our website in a while, I hope you'll take the chance to do that. We're actually in the process of revising that, so you may give it a few weeks and then look at it. But certainly going to be trying to provide as much good information on that web page as we possibly can. Sugarcane aphid. Again, I'm not giving you a talk on sugarcane aphid unless you have some questions about it later on, but these are some of the hybrids that we've identified that we feel like do have some tolerance to sugarcane aphid. Now, we're using the term tolerance. The entomologists don't like it, some of the breeders don't like it. The proper term is resistance. But our thinking, at least some of the seed companies' thinking on that, and why we're using the word tolerance, you still may very well have to spray for sugarcane aphid with some of these hybrids. It's not resistant in the sense you can just walk away from it and forget about it. You're still going to have to be scouting these hybrids. What it may do is, in some cases, will prevent maybe having to use any application of insecticide, or maybe just one application where this last year people were making 2 and 3. So that's why we're using the term tolerance there, but you will need to be scouting these. These hybrids. A lot of these on this list are medium full maturing hybrids, which may not fit you. There's a handful of them there that are early to medium type hybrids that are probably better fit for this area. Those are the ones you're more than likely are going to want to look at. But anyway, this is the list that we've put together. I've actually updated a little bit since I sent this in a couple of weeks ago. There's another hybrid or two on that list. But this is the list that I feel most comfortable with. There are some other hybrids that some of the seed companies will be promoting that they consider moderately tolerant. Some of those may very well give you some benefit, but we're trying to make this list as conservative as possible. So we feel pretty good about this particular list. But again, it doesn't mean you're not going to have to scout and possibly spray for sugarcane if we indeed have the problem again this next year. And there's no way of knowing if we're going to have the problem or not next year. I'll be personally very surprised if it's, we may have the problem, and I'll be very surprised if it's as bad as it was last year. Because this clearly is one of the worst places in the U.S. last year. And I don't think that, I'll be surprised if that happens next year, but again, we'll see. Seeding rate. Do want to talk about this, and again, you've heard talks on this before, but I think we're still, for the most part, planting too much seed in this area. Now, when I get up in the Grand Island and give a talk tomorrow, clearly they're going to be using a higher seeding rate because they have a lot more potential than what we typically have here. The difference in these two fields that you're seeing here is just seeding rate as far as the yield that this particular crop made. Why is it important? Well, if you look at the components that make up yield, from a dryland situation, and the drier it is, the more true this is, the more important it is for the number of seed per head. That's the biggest component that makes up the yield. Now, as you get more rainfall, as you do some limited irrigation, get into full irrigation, and that begins to shift, and at some point, you've got to have more heads out there. Because a head's only going to get potentially so big. So at some point, clearly, you've got to have more heads. And so that's what this data is showing. The bottom there, the grain weight per head. Okay, that's another measure really of seed number per head. But the range on that can be typically between 0.06 and about 0.17 or so pounds of grain per head. 0.06 is going to be a small head. 0.16 or 0.17 would be a very large head. And that plant would essentially be more efficient, or that plant would be. So if we assume 1 pound or 0.1 pound per head, you can very quickly figure out what the number of heads you need to have out in that field or at harvest time to give you any particular yield. So if you can do that with a 3,000 pound yield goal, again using that 0.1 pound per head, then you can need 30,000 heads. Does that mean you need to plant 30,000 seed? Not really. Again, that kind of depends a little bit on the hybrid and the time of planting, but we know sorghum is going to tiller it, right? And so you have to consider that. Now, the other thing with sorghum, for the most part, in a dryland situation, if you plant 30,000, you're not going to get 30,000 up. It may have a 90% plus germination on the tag, but typically in a dryland situation, when it's not ideal conditions, you're not going to get 90% emergence. So you're going to get something less than that. Typically in dryland, I use 75%. Is what's going to come up and give you a good stand. So you got to take that into account. The tillage, I use 1.5. 1.5 tillers per plant is what I would use typically. Sometimes you can have more, sometimes less, but I think that's a decent number. So when you add all this up for 30,000 heads, you're going to need to plant about 24,000 seeds per acre is what you would probably plant in this particular case. Now, one thing I did want to point out, if we plant early, again, trying to avoid sugarcane acre this coming year, typically the earlier you plant, the more tillage you get. And so keep that in mind. So the producer I was talking about earlier that was thinking about late planted sorghum, it's not going to tiller much. the later it's planted. That has to do with different things, but largely, I think soil temperature drives a lot of that. And so, as you plant later, you would want to increase your seeding rate. In the academic world, they talk a lot about harvest index. You don't hear that talked about much in a grower meeting. But I think it is something to consider and think about a little bit when it comes to sorghum. Harvest index is simply the ratio of grain produced compared to total biomass that's out there. Okay? So it's the ratio really of grain to stover. And so if you're growing corn or sorghum, you'd like that harvest index to be as high as possible. Because that means that plant is more efficient. You're making more grain that you can sell, for the resources as possible. So you want that harvest index to be typically high. With sorghum, what happens is you can make your yield two ways. And if you have decent water, you can have a very wide range of sorghum yields, plant population, and still get the same yield. You either have a bunch of plants out there with a small head, or you have fewer plants out there with bigger heads. That's what it amounts to. And what happens with sorghum, you're going to grow this stover. You're going to grow this pretty much no matter what. Yeah, on a really high yield, you're going to have a little bit more stover out there, but it's not that much. Okay? You're going to grow this regardless. And once you grow the stover, then you start making the grain. Okay? So again, what is the most efficient use of your resources? Having two plants out there that give you the same amount of grain as this one plant. Well, clearly it's the one plant. Okay? So again, that's the reason that especially in a low water environment, you want to be using the lowest plant population in the environment. I've seen 30,000 plant population yield 8,000 pounds before. So there's a lot of potential in that sorghum plant with fewer plants. Okay, a good example of this, y'all seen a curve like this before, but this is dryland seeding rate, dryland production. Aqua population ranges anywhere from 16 to 32,000, when you look at this. So, basically you double and you're still getting basically the same yield. Again, it goes back to that harvest index, okay? So, is it that important what your seeding rate is? Well, again, it's not if you've got more water over here. I mean, if I've got a full profile of water on clay loam soil and the forecast is for good rain, then I'm probably going to want to be over here more, this 30,000 range. Because then if I do get that rain that I'm expecting, my yield potential can be better. On the other hand, if it's going to be turn off dry and I don't have a full profile of water and I have more of a sandy soil, then I better be back over here on this plant population. Still have good yield potential, but in that dry year, I'm going to be better off. Because again, you're going to grow that stover. You're going to grow it first before you make any of that grain. So here's some recommendations on the seeding rate as far as yield goes. I don't have anything less than 3,000 pounds there. But certainly you want to back off a little bit more if you don't think you can make 3,000 pounds. But that's the goal that I think I would use if I were most of you, at least 3,000 pounds. That's more or less the seeding rate that I would go with. As you get into more irrigation, then I'm going to increase that seeding rate. 50 to 60,000 seeding rate will give you potentially a very good yield. A very good yield. And then as I push that on up to some higher yields that I want to shoot for, and I think these are certainly achievable, some of these higher yields. I think we've not concentrated enough with sorghum on trying to produce some high yields. Most of you probably heard of this 2 years ago, 2014, a guy just not far from here at all grew 247 bushels of sorghum. So it's quite possible. Looking at some data yesterday from outside of Amarillo where they were growing, actually it was 250. Now this is over on small plots, but it can be done. And I think that's something we need to concentrate on and start looking at a little bit more when it comes to sorghum. Okay, planting day. Normally I would spend a little bit more time talking about planting day, but again, because of the situation with the sugarcane acre, I'm going to plant early, I think, this year. But regardless of that, you really want that soil temperature to be 60 degrees. Now, you can push that a little bit to 57, 58, but you better be expecting some really good warm weather after you plant that. Because below 60, that seed just sits there, doesn't do anything. And when it's not out of the ground, bad things happen. And so, you know, you want that soil temperature to be at 60 degrees really before you plant. Water management. Again, talking about growing that stover first. It takes anywhere from 6 to 8 inches of water to grow that stover. After that, then you start making ground. Okay? So that's kind of a good number to keep in mind. Is that 6 to 8 inches, then you start making grain. And any water above that really adds to the grain very quickly, to the yield. And it can make a big difference. So if you've got 20 inches of water, you certainly have the potential for 7,000 pound plus grain. You need to know your soil type. I'm sure most of you do. You know your soil type. Do you know how much water that soil will hold? What's the plant availability of that water? Important number to know. You've got to know that. Water in the soil is like money in the bank, okay, when it comes to farming. You've got to know what that number is. And so you can use the simple, rods that you push in the ground to give you an idea how much moisture there's in the ground, or you can use some of this equipment that a lot of people are using now that monitors how much soil moisture you have. But it's very important to know that number. If I've got a clay loam soil and I've got 6 inches of available soil moisture in that top 3 feet, hey, I can make some plans on that. Again, if I have more of a sandy soil and I have half of that water available, I've got to consider that. I need to be backing off my seeding rate. I probably need to have a higher irrigation capacity if I'm watering on that situation. So know what's in your soil and plan accordingly. Increasing soil water at planting. Again, very important. As you go from Lubbock north, it amazes me, the further north you go, the more minimum and no tillage you see, which is interesting to me because, again, you get up into that, upper Kansas, Nebraska area where they have much more rainfall than what we have here, and they have less ET demand. They're using a lot more minimum tillage than we are here, which often is the opposite. Okay, because we know that minimum tillage can help store that soil moisture. Now, clearly, what's limiting our yield is soil moisture most of the time out here. So consider that, and that's tough to do if you're in a continuous cotton situation. So rotating with these different crops that have higher residue, I think, can be a great benefit there. Okay, this is a water use curve. This is over 20 years. This is out at Bushland. It'll be somewhat similar here. You've seen these kind of curves before. This is just showing the line if you had 3 gallons per minute per acre. Even with sorghum, you're not, with 3 gallons per minute per acre, you're not going to completely meet the demand of that crop. So that's where you've got to have that water stored in the soil to meet that demand. These are, again, are average numbers over 20 years. So it doesn't, about 0.27 is about the top, 0.27 inches is about on average, the maximum water use. But that's an average. Again, you can get into those years, and you'll get into those days pretty much any time, but it can get up to this 0.35 or maybe even approaching 0.4. In the big drought of 2011, where we had 30-mile-an-hour winds and 100-degree weather, I actually saw this get to 0.5 in sorghum, which is the highest I've ever seen. So it can happen. So these are average numbers. But some things I want to point out. Panicle initiation occurs roughly 24 to 30 days after emergence. Okay, that's when that crop is switching over from purely vegetative to reproductive phase, and it's beginning to make the grain per head. That head size is beginning to be determined. And it'll continue to be determined up through flowering there. So this is important. If you're putting on herbicide, for example, a lot of the herbicides, with 2,4-D, Banvel, and some others, you want to get that on before that panicle initiation. Once that little head gets above the ground, then again, bad things can happen. And you can blast some heads and do some other things with herbicide. So that becomes important. You're not using a lot of water up to this point. Then you start getting this rapid growth period. This is also when you start using a lot of nutrients at this time. Okay, so if you're going to use your nutrients most efficiently, this will be true with this corn or cotton, or corn or sorghum. Once you get that rapid growth period, you want to start having adequate fertilizer, certainly right in here. So if you're going to side dress, that again is the most efficient way to put out your fertilizer to get the most bang for your buck is to split up that application. You want to be side dressing probably around that 30-day after emergence to get the most use out of that nitrogen. Again, rapid growth, seed number being determined. Now, again, if you use some minimum tillage system and you've stored some water into that soil, a lot of times, especially with the clay loam soil, we can get by for a good 45 days or so in pretty good shape without plants would not stress much, just from that soil water. And if we get some rain on top of that, then we'll really benefit. But if it's dry, if you don't have that water during this period and you can irrigate, you better be doing it. Because again, that's when that number of seed per head is going to be determined. So you don't want it to stress right there. But again, a lot of times we get into this area where we're in fairly good shape, just some rainfall and stored water. Really the most critical time probably is going to be right there at boot, pre-boot and flowering. When if you only have one watering you can put on 1.5 inches right then. Most years that's going to be the time to do it. Now, if the crop's burning out before then, you got to get on, go to where you get water. But that usually tends to be the most critical time to water that plant. During the grain field period, certainly if you're pushing yields, you want to be watering it there also. And I wanted to point out, I've got this, when it's mature. When you reach physiological maturity there, after 110 days or whatever the case may be, and then the drying period. Something certainly to consider, I think, if you've had a dry period there, and your soil's getting dried out, and you've got really good yield potential, and you can irrigate, putting on another inch, even though that crop maybe has reached maturity or getting close to it, I think can be important from a stock integrity standpoint. Because what tends to happen, you have really good yield potential, we turned off dry during August, and that crop starts using moisture and nutrients from that stalk to feed the head, and then you get some lodging. So I think if you put an inch on, 1.5 inches on, sometimes right after that, right during that late period when the crops begin to dry down, can be important just from a stock integrity standpoint. This is just showing the different water uses of the different crops. You'll see that sorghum and cotton in this example are very similar when planted on a similar date. Again, this is an early planting date, just to kind of compare those a little bit. Thought that was interesting. I want to talk to the speaker from Nebraska here a little bit about, they're saying the sorghum there in Nebraska is using 30 inches. That really surprises me that they would use that much in Nebraska, and I'd like to visit with him about that. Because typically out here, full production sorghum is going to be around that 26, 27 inch, is what we would expect for full production on sorghum in this region. And that's total water. If we look at some water use efficiencies here a little bit, I like this table, I like this set of data because I think it's real numbers. This is 10 years of studies that were done on farmer fields. These are farmer yields, and looking at those numbers. Leon, you put this together a while back. And then comparing that to 9-year numbers of TAWC. Interesting to me, these numbers are pretty similar, which is good. So I think these are some good numbers to use when you're kind of comparing different crops and water use. I don't quite know what's going on here. There is a fairly big difference. There is a big difference in cotton, and somebody's going to have to explain to me why that's such a big difference. But the other crops, the grain crops, those numbers are pretty close between the two groups that were measuring this. Grain sorghum, or sorghum side, just to mention that just for a second. 1.5 tons per acre inch compared to 1.25 on corn. A little bit on that. I mean, the corn side yields are typically you're going to be putting on more water on the corn. Typically, they're going to yield higher. A corn side crop compared to a forward sorghum crop. And a lot of the reason for that is usually you're putting on a lot less water on that sorghum. And so even though the water use efficiency is higher on that with the solid, so you're getting more bang for your irrigation inch, your total yields may not be as high as they would be for corn, assuming you've got plenty of water for that. This is looking at different irrigation amounts and irrigation use efficiency, and I think this is some pretty good numbers here to use also. And I've seen this some other data that supports this. Really, when it comes to irrigation water use efficiency, rather than trying to fully water that 100%, getting 100% ET, a lot of data shows you're better off in that 60 to 75% range. It's where you're typically better off. Not only with sorghum, but I think most crops, that's probably the way it is, as far as getting the biggest bang for your buck on your inch of water. So I think that's some pretty good numbers there to use also.
I do.
Okay, where do you make the decision on which crop to grow if you're trying to decide between corn and sorghum? You've seen probably lines like this before, and these slopes of these lines can change a lot if you just change that number a little bit. For example, on corn, typically the 600 pounds per inch is a number a lot of people use. If you change that to 650, that's going to change that slope, significantly. And I think that's something to consider. I think out here 600 is still a pretty good number to use on corn. Sorghum, I'm using a couple of different numbers here. I really think for this area, this 425 pounds per acre inch is the number I would probably use on that. And so if you look at where these numbers cross, okay, with corn and sorghum there, probably around that 120 bushels is kind of the breaking point, I think, when it comes to yield. If you can grow corn, depending on what your yield goal is, I think that's kind of the place where I'd break it. It's less than about 120 bushel, I think you ought to be thinking sorghum. More than that, now we start thinking about corn. To me, that's kind of where that line probably breaks. And as far as irrigation amounts, again, this is total water, so assuming your irrigation water, your rainfall and your soil water makes up roughly, in this case, about 11 inches, 10 to 11 inches of that total, then this is where you're at on irrigation. About 10 inches of irrigation water that you have to put on that crop. It would seem to me to be a pretty good number on where I would draw the line on sorghum and corn. This is just an example. This is from a good, actually, of Agronomist, but I think it makes a good example. Today's getting a little bit old, but it makes a good point here. In this particular case, this was a drought year, but the rainfall was what, 3.75 inches, so dry year, dry growing season year. But the guy had a full profile of water going into the season, on clay loam soil. So he was banking on that. He ended up putting on a total of about 7 inches of water, okay? But again, because he had good soil water, he got through this early season in pretty good shape and did put on about 3/4 of an inch here fairly early. Also got a rain run in there. Then it got dry. He didn't have to water again until flag leaf. So put about 1.5 inches on, another 1.5 inches or so on it flowering and so on, for a total of about 7 inches. The point I want to make, you made 5,400 pounds on 7 inches of water in a very dry year. So again, timing of that irrigation and how you manage it clearly can make a difference. Something that we certainly learned in 2011 in that year that we had with the drought and high temperatures. And this surprised me a little bit. Going into that, we had a lot of questions like, what can I do with this corn crop or sorghum crop or whatever it was from a water management standpoint? I've only got so much water and my crop is burning up. And the temptation was to speed up and get over that land as quick as you could, at least get some water on it. What we really learned in 2011, that is not the thing to do. You want to slow down, okay? Because you want to put more water on it at any given time. And the reason for that, regardless of what kind of sprinkler system you've got a certain amount of evaporation that's going to occur. So if you put on a 1/2 inch and it's 100 degrees and 30-mile-an-hour wind, you may be losing 2/10 of that. It's gone. But you're going to lose that 2/10, whether it's 1/2 inch you're putting on or 1 inch. And over 4 or 5 irrigations, that adds up. And that's what we really saw in that year, in 2011. So when you do get in those situations where things are getting dry and you're not sure what to do, you're really better off to slow down and put more on any given application than trying to speed up and not put much on it. Use of rotations to better optimize your water is certainly kind of another subject that we can get into, but the idea here is to stagger plant your crops so that you're meeting peak water demand at different times of the year to better utilize the crop. From a sorghum standpoint, this is just showing different planting dates and how you shift the water use over, and then you can match that up with other crops and your water. So splitting your pivot into half cotton, half sorghum, half corn, half sorghum, whatever it is, I think you can match up some things there to better utilize your water. Last thing I think I want to mention, 40-inch rows out here. I know there's good reasons for doing that with cotton crop, and in some cases, even with sorghum, that's a good thing to do when you're on very limited rainfall. But if you do have some irrigation capacity, where you can put on some water, I really do think you're better off with a more narrow row. And if you're not, you can't go from 40s to 30s overnight, but you could consider possibly doing some twin row planting. And I do think there is some benefits to that from a sorghum standpoint, where you do have some water you can put on that crop. Just summarizing things here a little bit, hey, let's consider input costs on all these crops. Use the minimum seeding rate you can get by with for whatever your yield goal is, and then optimize your irrigation water by, again, several different things you can do there. Maintaining crop residue. We talked about the less frequent, the higher water application per rate, and then just the timing of that water when you put it on can all make a difference. With that, I'll be glad to answer some questions.